Hello coin hunters. What if that old, dark, dirty Jefferson nickel sitting in your pocket or coin jar is hiding a detail collectors are searching for? Today we are uncovering the story behind valuable top 4 Jefferson nickels with the D mint mark, exploring rare varieties, condition, Monticello details, collector demand, and documented market values. So before you spend that 5-cent coin, take a closer look, because its real story may be hiding in the smallest details. Let's play with step 1. Imagine finding an old dark Jefferson nickel in your pocket change, a coin that looks worn, aged, and almost forgotten, then turning it over and discovering a small letter D beneath the Monticello design. Now imagine that this simple 5-cent piece carries a history reaching back more than 70 years, a story connected to the United States Mint, Jefferson, wartime-era American coinage history, and the enormous world of coin collecting. Today we are taking a close look at the 1953 D Jefferson nickel, especially the examples that collectors watch carefully for condition, strike quality, full steps details, unusual varieties, and exceptional preservation. Because while millions of ordinary coins can remain inexpensive, the right combination of date, mint mark, grade, surface quality, variety, and collector demand can transform an ordinary-looking nickel into a serious collectible. And that is exactly why old Jefferson nickels deserve a second look. So before you spend another old nickel without checking it, stay with me because we are going to examine the history and background of the 1955 D Jefferson nickel, its unique design features, the importance of the D mint mark, the difference between an ordinary circulated example and a premium collector example, the role of condition and full steps, the current market evidence from professional auction records, and the details that can make one example far more desirable than another. This is not simply a story about 5 cents. It is a story about American history sitting in the palm of your hand. And by the end of this video, you will understand why serious collectors continue to examine old Jefferson nickels with extraordinary attention. The Jefferson nickel series began in 1938, and the design placed Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, while the reverse featured Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, creating one of the most recognizable designs in American coinage. The Jefferson nickel became part of everyday American commerce, meaning enormous numbers entered circulation and were handled by generations of people, shops, banks, vending machines, and businesses. By 1955, the series had already developed a substantial collecting history, and the Denver Mint struck 74,464,100 Jefferson nickels dated 1953 with the D mint mark, a production figure that is important because it tells us something immediately. The date itself is collectible and historically interesting, but the D mint mark by itself does not make every 1953 D nickel rare instead. The collector story becomes much more interesting when we examine strike quality, preservation, varieties, and the tiny details that separate common circulated pieces from premium examples. The 1953 D issue is especially interesting because many examples were produced with worn dies and weak detail, and professional numismatic references note that full steps examples are scarce, while 6 full steps examples are exceedingly rare. This is one of the reasons collectors can look at 2 coins carrying exactly the same date and mint mark and see dramatically different levels of desirability. The ordinary coin may simply be an old Jefferson nickel, while a superbly preserved example with exceptional reverse detail can enter a completely different collector category. And that distinction is at the heart of understanding the potential value of this famous 5-cent coin. Now let's examine the unique features that make the 1953 D Jefferson nickel recognizable. On the obverse you should see the portrait of Thomas Jefferson facing left, with the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1953. The reverse carries the famous Monticello building, surrounded by the inscriptions United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, 5 cents, and MONTICLLO. And on a Denver struck example, the small D mint mark identifies the Denver Mint origin. When examining an old coin, collectors pay attention to the date, mint mark, lettering, portrait details, rim, surfaces, luster, contact marks, and especially the reverse steps beneath Monticello. Those steps can become one of the most important visual features for premium Jefferson nickel collectors. Because a coin with clearly separated steps can have considerably greater collector appeal than a similarly dated example where the steps are weak or blended together. This is where the phrase full steps becomes extremely important. Professional grading services use designations connected with the preservation and visibility of the steps on Monticello, and the 1953 D issue is particularly famous among collectors because strong full steps examples are difficult to locate. The coin therefore has several layers of interest. First, there is the historical date. Second, there is the Denver Mint origin. Third, there is condition. Fourth, there is strike quality. Fifth, there are possible varieties. And sixth, there is the competitive collector market for coins that achieve exceptional grades. A dark appearance can certainly make a coin look old and visually dramatic, but collectors should understand that natural tunning, environmental discoloration, surface damage, and actual corrosion are not interchangeable terms. The strongest market examples are judged primarily on authentic condition and technical quality rather than simply looking old or rusty. When collectors talk about rarity, one of the most important lessons is that rarity is not determined simply by age. A coin can be more than 70 years old and still exist in large numbers, while a particular high grade or specific variety can be genuinely scarce. The 1953 D. Jefferson nickel is a perfect example of this principle. More than 78 million were struck, so the date itself is not comparable to an ultra-low mintage issue, however. The number of surviving coins that combine excellent preservation, strong strike characteristics, and clearly defined full steps can be dramatically smaller, and that is where collector demand becomes especially important. Professional numismatic references identify 5 FS examples as very scarce and 6 FS examples as exceedingly rare for this issue, meaning that a collector searching for a top-quality example is competing for a much smaller population than someone simply searching for any 1953 D nickel. The same principle applies to recognized varieties, including the 1953 D S over mint mark, where the mint mark history itself creates another collecting avenue. Professional auction records demonstrate that recognized varieties and high-grade full steps coins can attract serious bidding, but the exact variety must be authenticated rather than assumed from a photograph or from a strange-looking mint mark. This is why experienced collectors inspect the coin carefully and compare it with recognized variety references before making a major value claim. The real excitement comes from understanding that value is created by a combination of factors rather than by one dramatic word such as rare, old, dark, rusty, or 5 cent. And when several desirable characteristics come together, the market can become considerably more competitive. Now we come to the question that everybody wants answered: what could a 1953 D. Jefferson nickel actually be worth in today's market? And this is where we need to separate ordinary examples from exceptional collector pieces. Current published guides indicate that circulated 1955 D. Jefferson nickels can remain close to face value, while uncirculated examples can rise substantially depending on grade. And NGC's current guide information shows a wide progression from modest values in lower grades into much higher values for superior uncirculated examples. The important point is that a coin does not become valuable simply because someone describes it online as a rare old nickel. The market responds to the actual characteristics of the individual coin, and auction records provide the strongest evidence for what collectors have actually paid. For example, PCGS records show a 1953 D. Jefferson nickel graded MS-64 full steps selling for $1,150 in a David Lawrence auction, while a 1953 D. MS-65 full steps example recorded a $7,188 sale. And a PCGS MS-66 full steps example sold for $4,320 in the November 2025 Stack's Bowers Showcase auction, with the same record showing a PCGS price guide value of $6,500 at the time. Another published guide reports an MS-66 full steps auction record of $9,694. These numbers demonstrate something extremely important for anyone watching this video. A spectacular 1953 D can indeed move from a 5-cent denomination into the thousands of dollars, but that result belongs to exceptional certified examples rather than every dark circulated nickel carrying the 1953D date. Therefore, if you find one in pocket change, the correct reaction is not to assume you have a $1 million coin. The correct reaction is to examine it carefully, because you may have found a coin worth investigating. There is another fascinating part of the 1953D story, and that is the world of mintmark varieties. Collectors have documented 1953D S Jefferson nickel varieties, in which the D mintmark was struck over an S mintmark. These varieties are especially interesting because they preserve evidence of the production process itself, and that production history can add another dimension of collector demand. Auction records show that recognized 1953D S pieces have brought hundreds or even more than $1,000, depending on grade and exact variety. One PCGS record for a 1953D S MS66 example lists a $1,320 sale in November 2025, while another historic PCGS auction record for an MS66 example lists a $560 sale. And professional references distinguish the DS variety from ordinary 1953D coins. This is why looking only at the date and mint mark is not enough for advanced collecting. A collector should also inspect the mint mark area for evidence of a recognized variety. But there is a major difference between genuine variety attribution and an irregular-looking mark caused by damage, corrosion, scratches, or lighting. A strange shape on a worn coin does not automatically prove an over-mintmark variety. Serious collectors compare diagnostics, and when the potential value justifies it, consider professional attribution and certification. This is one of the most exciting aspects of American coin collecting, because tiny details created during manufacturing can survive for decades and eventually become the focus of specialized collectors. So when you examine a 1953D Jefferson nickel, do not just ask whether it looks old. Ask whether it has a combination of characteristics that makes it unusual, recognizable, and desirable within the established Jefferson nickel collecting community. Condition is another major factor, and this is where the phrase dark rusty condition needs careful attention, because collectors distinguish between natural tunning and surfaces that have suffered environmental damage. A coin may develop darker coloration over decades, and attractive natural tunning can sometimes contribute to visual appeal, but actual corrosion, pitting, severe surface damage, or harsh cleaning can reduce desirability. So the most important thing is to preserve the coin rather than trying to make it look newer. Collectors generally want original surfaces, authentic details, and strong preservation. And this becomes especially important for a coin such as the 1953D, where top-grade full-steps examples are scarce. The difference between a circulated coin and a mint state coin can be enormous. Because mint state indicates that the coin has not entered normal circulation in the same way as a worn example, while the numerical grade communicates the level of preservation under professional grading standards. The reverse steps beneath Monticello become particularly important because weak strikes can make them difficult to distinguish, even when the coin has relatively attractive surfaces. And this is why the highest quality examples are so interesting to specialists. If you have an old 1953D nickel with a dark appearance, the best approach is to handle it carefully by the edges, avoid aggressive cleaning, avoid polishing, and preserve its current surfaces while you investigate the date, mint mark, condition, and possible variety. A collector who protects an original coin gives themselves a better opportunity to have its genuine characteristics evaluated, while a collector who aggressively alters the surface may remove the very originality that another collector would want. The current market also shows why certification and auction history matter, because professional grading can establish a standardized assessment of condition and can make a high-grade coin easier for collectors to compare. However, certification does not magically create rarity. The underlying coin must still possess the characteristics that collectors value. This is especially relevant when discussing sensational claims about coins being worth $10,000s, $900s of thousands, or $20 million. The strongest responsible coin collecting content separates confirmed auction results from speculative possibilities. For the 1953D Jefferson nickel, documented public sales provide clear evidence that exceptional full steps examples can reach several $1,000s, while ordinary circulated examples generally do not approach those levels. NGC's published information, as of August 2026, gives circulated examples very modest values while showing much higher values for superior uncirculated grades, and PCGS auction records provide direct examples of premium full steps coins selling for four-figure amounts. That means the phrase market value today should always be connected to a specific grade, variety, designation, and actual market evidence, not simply to the fact that the coin is old. This is also why collectors should be cautious about online videos that display an ordinary worn coin and immediately announce an enormous price without explaining the grade, variety, certification, or comparable sales. The exciting truth is already strong enough. This little 5-cent coin has documented examples that have crossed into the $10,000s of dollars when the right characteristics are present. And that is a fascinating story without needing to exaggerate it into an unsupported $20 million claim. If you are checking your own 1953 D. Jefferson nickel, start with the basics and then move toward the details. First, confirm the date, then confirm the D mint mark, then examine both sides under good lighting, look at the portrait, lettering, rim, surfaces, and reverse design, then pay special attention to the steps beneath Monticello, because strong step separation can be one of the most important characteristics for premium Jefferson nickel collecting. After that, examine the mint mark area for possible variety diagnostics, but do not declare variety simply because the mint mark looks unusual. Compare it with trusted numismatic references or seek professional attribution when appropriate. Next, evaluate the overall condition. Ask whether the coin has circulation wear, whether the surfaces remain original, whether there are major marks, whether the luster survives, and whether the reverse details remain unusually sharp. Most importantly, do not clean the coin simply because it looks dark, old, or dirty. Cleaning can permanently change the surface and can hurt collector appeal. Instead, preserve the coin as found and document what you see. If an example appears genuinely exceptional, professional grading may be worth investigating, because an independently assigned grade can help establish its position within the collector market. And remember that the highest prices are usually connected with coins that meet very specific standards, not simply with coins that have an old date. The 1953 D. Jefferson nickel also teaches us something bigger about American pocket change. Every coin has a story, but not every coin has the same market value. A coin can be historically fascinating without being expensive, and a coin can be financially important because it combines scarcity, grade, variety, and collector demand. The 1953 D is especially compelling because its large mintage might make the date look ordinary at first glance. Yet its top-quality full steps population creates a completely different collecting challenge. This contrast is exactly what makes coin hunting exciting. The valuable discovery is not necessarily the oldest coin or the darkest coin. It can be the coin with the right combination of characteristics that other collectors are actively searching for. And that is why knowledgeable collectors examine details instead of relying on appearance alone. When you see an old Jefferson nickel, think beyond the 5-cent denomination. Think about the mint that produced it, the year it was made, the condition it survived in, the quality of the strike, the preservation of the surfaces, the clarity of Monticello, and whether a recognized variety may be present. Those questions turn a simple piece of pocket change into an object of historical and numismatic investigation. And for anyone building a collection, learning to identify those differences is far more valuable than simply memorizing sensational price numbers. Step 2, yet one that becomes dramatically more interesting when collectors examine its condition: strike quality, full steps, mint mark characteristics, and rare die varieties. This is exactly why old pocket change deserves a second look. The coin in your hand may still be worth only a small amount, but another example carrying the same date and mint mark can enter a completely different collector market when it possesses exceptional preservation or a recognized variety. Today we are going deep into the history of the 1964 D. Jefferson nickel, the story behind Monticello, the importance of the D mint mark, the reason high-grade examples are so difficult to find, the famous full steps designation, the extraordinary auction results achieved by exceptional specimens, and the details that collectors should examine before deciding whether their old nickel deserves further research. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand why a coin with a face value of only 5 cents can become a fascinating collectible worth 10 hundreds, 20 thousands, and in exceptional documented cases, even approaching 5 figures. And you will also understand why the condition and variety of the individual coin matter far more than simply seeing the year 1964 and the letter D. The Jefferson nickel has a remarkable place in American coin history. The series began in 1938, after Felix Schlage's design was selected for the new 5-cent piece honoring Thomas Jefferson. The obverse features Jefferson's portrait, while the reverse features Monticello, his famous Virginia home, creating a design that became instantly recognizable across generations of American commerce. By 1964, the Jefferson nickel had already been circulating for more than 2 decades, and the United States Mint was producing enormous quantities of 5-cent pieces for everyday transactions. The 1964 D issue was struck at the Denver Mint and reached a reported mintage of 1,787,297,160 coins. An extraordinary number that makes the date itself anything but a low mintage issue. In fact, PCGS notes that the 1964 D Jefferson nickel has the highest mintage of any nickel ever struck by the United States Mint. And that historical fact creates one of the most interesting contradictions in the series. How can a coin produced in such enormous numbers become a difficult coin in the highest grades? The answer is preservation and strike quality. Millions of examples entered circulation and acquired marks, wear, dull surfaces, and other signs of handling, while the surviving coins with exceptional surfaces and sharply defined Monticello steps became much harder to locate. That is why advanced collectors do not simply count how many coins were originally made. They study how many high-quality survivors exist today. And that is where the 1964 D Jefferson nickel becomes far more interesting than its enormous mintage might suggest. Now let's look closely at the unique features that identify this coin. On the obverse you will see Thomas Jefferson facing left, along with the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1964. On the reverse you will see Monticello surrounded by United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, 5 cents, and MONTICLLO, and the small d mint mark identifies the Denver Mint as the production facility. The coin has a plain edge, a diameter of approximately 21.20 millimeters, and a weight of about 5 grams. Its composition is 75% copper and 25% nickel, making it different from the silver alloy nickels produced during the World War II years. And these basic specifications give collectors a starting point for authentication and identification. But the most exciting feature for advanced Jefferson nickel collectors is often found on the reverse beneath Monticello, where the steps can show different levels of definition depending on the strength of the strike and the preservation of the coin. When those steps are sufficiently complete and uninterrupted, the coin may qualify for a full steps designation under professional grading standards, and that designation can dramatically increase collector interest. This is one of the great lessons of the 1964 D issue. The date and mint mark tell you what the coin is, but the strike and preservation can tell you whether you may have something much more desirable, which means that a collector should never stop examining the coin after confirming the 1964 date and the D mint mark. Instead, turn the coin over, study Monticello, examine the step separation, look closely at the fields, and inspect the surfaces under good lighting. Because some of the most important information is waiting on the reverse. The condition of the coin is absolutely central to understanding its market potential, because an old dirty Jefferson nickel that has spent decades in circulation is very different from a coin that somehow survived with extraordinary mint state preservation. Circulation creates contact marks, scratches, wear, loss of luster, and softness in the design, while an exceptional uncirculated example can retain much sharper details and stronger original surfaces. Collectors and grading services evaluate these characteristics carefully, and the highest grades become increasingly difficult to achieve as standards become stricter. This is especially important for the 1964D because the enormous production run does not mean enormous numbers of pristine survivors. PCGS specifically describes the date as difficult to find in high grades and notes that full steps examples are even scarcer. With only a small number of very high-grade full steps examples known in its published commentary, that means an ordinary circulated 1964D and a superb certified 1964D can represent completely different markets even though they carry exactly the same date and mint mark. And this is why the word rare needs to be used carefully in coin collecting. The entire issue is not rare in the traditional low mintage sense, but specific combinations of grade. Strike, full steps, and variety can be genuinely scarce. Collectors compete for those combinations because they are building complete sets, registry sets, specialized collections, and high-quality Jefferson nickel holdings. And when multiple collectors want the same scarce coin, competition can push auction prices much higher than the original 5-cent denomination suggests. The words dirty and dark can make a coin look dramatic on camera, but experienced collectors know that appearance alone does not determine value. A naturally toned coin, a circulated coin, a coin with environmental discoloration, and a coin with damaged surfaces can all look very different under different lighting. And the most important question is not simply whether the coin looks old. The question is whether the underlying surfaces remain desirable and authentic. A coin should never be polished simply to make it look brighter, because altering the surface can reduce collector appeal, and collectors should avoid aggressive cleaning methods when examining an old Jefferson nickel. Instead, preserve the coin as found and focus on identification, condition, and diagnostics. If the coin appears especially promising, professional evaluation can help establish whether it is actually in a high grade or possesses a recognized variety. This is particularly important for coins being considered for certification, because the market values quoted for exceptional 1964D examples are based on professionally graded pieces and specific characteristics, not simply on a photograph of a dark coin. So if your 1964D looks dirty, remember that the dirt itself is not the treasure. The treasure is whatever genuine numismatic characteristics may be hiding beneath decades of ordinary circulation and handling, and that is why careful examination is far more useful than trying to make an old coin look new. Now we reach the part that makes collectors pay attention, the current market and the documented auction evidence. And this is where the 1964D Jefferson nickel becomes especially exciting. PCGS currently lists an auction record of $9,900 for a 1964D MS67 full steps Jefferson nickel sold by Heritage Auctions on May 4, 2025. That is an extraordinary result for a 5-cent coin. But the grade and full steps designation are essential to understanding the number. This was not an ordinary dirty circulated nickel. It was an exceptionally high-grade certified example with full steps. And that distinction is the key to responsible coin valuation. Other documented sales reinforce the same pattern. A PCGS MS66 full steps example sold for $6,325 in 2009. A PCGS MS65 full steps example sold for $1,140 in 2021. And a PCGS MS65 full steps example sold for $470 in 2013, showing how dramatically the market can change according to grade, strike, timing, and collector competition. NGC has also published valuation information showing a substantial difference between ordinary mint state 1964D nickels and examples carrying 5FS or 6FS designations, with its published figures placing the 1964D 5FS and 6FS range from modest amounts into the thousands. These figures demonstrate that the true market story is not that every 1964D is a fortune. The real story is that the right 1964D can be a significant collectible because exceptional survivors are much harder to find than the original mintage number might suggest. There is another reason the 1964D Jefferson nickel deserves serious attention, and that is the documented 1964D repunched mintmark variety, sometimes abbreviated RPM. This variety represents a different category from the ordinary 1964D issue because it contains a recognizable mint mark characteristic created during the die preparation process. And the variety is listed by PCGS as 1964D D5C RPM FS501. This is where a seemingly tiny detail can become extremely important, because a normal D mint mark and a recognized D over D repunched mint mark are not necessarily treated as the same collectible. PCGS records a remarkable auction history for the 1964D D RPM FS501 variety, including an MS65 sale for $1,763 in 2013 and another heritage sale for $2,820 in 2016, while the PCGS Coin Facts page reports an auction record of $19,800 for an MS66 example sold by Heritage Auctions on July 17, 2022. That is a powerful demonstration of how a specific die variety combined with exceptional grade can transform the market value of a coin. But this is also exactly why collectors should not look at a blurry mint mark and immediately announce that they have the variety. Genuine variety attribution depends on recognized diagnostics, and damage, scratches, corrosion, or lighting can create misleading shapes that resemble varieties. The full steps designation deserves special attention because it is one of the biggest reasons that a high-grade 1964D can command a dramatically different market price. The steps on Monticello are part of the reverse design and can be difficult to preserve with complete separation because the striking process does not always produce every step with the same sharpness. And even a coin that looks beautiful overall may fail to receive the designation if the steps are not complete enough under the applicable grading standard. PCGS explains that its full steps designation requires a Jefferson nickel to be mint state at MS60 or better, and to display at least 5 complete steps on Monticello, with joined or fused steps excluded from the designation. This technical requirement explains why collectors sometimes turn a nickel over immediately after seeing a promising obverse, because the reverse can determine whether the coin enters a much more specialized collector category, and the 1964D is particularly important in this area. PCGS commentary notes that only a small number of very high-grade full steps examples have been certified, making the combination of MS66 or MS67 with full steps considerably more challenging than the huge original mintage might suggest. The market then becomes a competition among specialists who want the finest possible examples. One of the most interesting things about the market is that value does not rise in a straight line. A small change in grade can sometimes make a major difference, especially near the top of the grading scale. A circulated example may have limited premium. A lower mint state example can bring more. A high-grade example with strong strike quality can bring substantially more, and a top-grade full steps example can enter a completely different level of competition. The documented auction history illustrates this clearly. PCGS records a 1964D MS65 full steps sale at $1,140, while the MS67 full steps auction record reached $9,900 in 2025. The difference is not simply the number printed on the coin. It is the combination of preservation, grade, strike, designation, rarity within the grade, and collector demand. The same principle applies to the DD-RPM variety, where the documented $19,800 result belongs to a certified MS66 example of the recognized variety. This is why online claims about coins being worth thousands or millions must always be examined carefully. If a video says a dirty 1964D is automatically worth $10,000, the viewer should immediately ask what grade, what variety, what certification, what auction record, and what exact diagnostics support that claim. The strongest coin collecting stories are not based on exaggeration. They are based on real examples where collectors have demonstrated through competitive bidding that. When we talk about market value today, it is important to understand that an auction record is not the same thing as a guaranteed selling price for every similar-looking coin. Auction results represent specific coins sold under specific conditions. And market prices can change over time based on collector demand, certification, grade population, auction venue, timing, and the exact characteristics of the coin. The 1964D gives us several useful examples. A normal circulated coin is not comparable with an MS-65 full steps example. An MS-65 full steps example is not necessarily comparable with an MS-67 full steps example. And an ordinary 1964D is not comparable with the recognized DD-RPM variety. This is why responsible collectors should always describe a coin precisely before discussing its value. Instead of saying this nickel is worth 6,000, the better question is what exact grade, designation, variety, and auction evidence apply to this exact coin. When you ask that question, the market becomes much clearer, and the documented records become extremely useful. PCGS currently records the $10,900 MS-67 full steps sale as the 1964D auction record, while the DD-RPM variety has a separate $19,800 auction record in MS-66. Those are extraordinary numbers for the denomination, but they are also highly specific numbers connected to highly specific coins, and that precision is what makes the information useful for collectors. One especially powerful piece of evidence comes from the 1964D MS-67 full steps market. PCGS records a May 4, 2025 Heritage Auction sale at $9,900, making it one of the most important recent auction records for this issue. That result tells us that the highest quality examples can command a remarkable premium, but it also tells us exactly what kind of coin created that premium. It was not a dark circulated pocket nickel. It was a professionally graded MS-67 full steps example, and that distinction should always remain in the conversation. Another important record comes from the 1964 DD-RPM variety, where PCGS reports a $19,800 MS-66 auction record from July 2022, showing that an authenticated variety can push the market into an even higher range. These records are excellent reasons to inspect old coins carefully, but they should not be converted into a claim that every coin with the same date is worth those amounts. The collector market rewards specific qualities, and the closer your coin comes to the documented qualities of the record holder, the more meaningful the comparison becomes. And now we come to the conclusion. The 1964 Jefferson nickel is a perfect example of why you should never judge an old coin only by its face value or by how ordinary it looks at first glance. More than $1.7 billion was struck at Denver, making the issue extraordinarily large by historical standards. Yet exceptional high-grade examples with full steps can be difficult to find. And recognized varieties, such as the 1964 DD-RPM, can command dramatically higher prices when authenticated and preserved in strong grades. Documented auction results show a 1964 D MS-67 full steps at $9,900 and a 1964 DD-RPM MS-66 at $19,800, proving that this 5-cent denomination can reach remarkable collector prices under very specific circumstances. But the most important message is not to assume that every dirty or damaged coin is a fortune. The important message is to learn how to recognize the characteristics that the market actually rewards. Look at the date, confirm the D-mint mark, study the surfaces, examine Monticello, check the steps, investigate possible varieties, preserve the original condition, and compare your findings with reliable professional records. Step 3. The Monticello building standing proudly on the reverse, and underneath that famous building you notice details that appear much stronger than you expected. Then you turn the coin toward the light and discover the small D-mint mark. Suddenly, a simple 5-cent piece becomes a fascinating piece of American history. And that is exactly why today we are taking a close look at the 1963 D. Jefferson nickel. A coin that came from one of the most important periods in American coinage. A coin that circulated through everyday American life. A coin that was produced in enormous quantities, yet a coin that becomes far more interesting when its condition, strike quality, full steps, surface preservation, and possible varieties are examined carefully. Because in the world of rare coins, the date alone does not tell the entire story. The mint mark alone does not tell the entire story. And even the word old does not automatically mean valuable. The real excitement begins when history, condition, scarcity, and collector demand come together. So stay with me as we explore the history and background of the 1963 D. Jefferson nickel, its unique design features, the meaning of the D mint mark, the importance of Monticello and its steps, the role of condition in collector demand, the varieties that collectors may investigate, the current market evidence, and the practical steps you can take if you discover one in an old collection, coin jar, or pocket change. Because sometimes a coin that looks like an ordinary 5-cent piece can become a fascinating collectible once you understand exactly what you are looking at. The Jefferson nickel series began in 1938, and its design created one of the most recognizable 5-cent coins in American history. Thomas Jefferson appears on the obverse while Monticello, his historic Virginia home, appears on the reverse. The design was created by Felix Schlag, and it became a familiar part of American commerce for generations. By 1963, the Jefferson nickel had already been circulating for more than 20 years, meaning millions of Americans had handled these coins in stores, banks, vending machines, businesses, and everyday transactions. The 1963 D issue was struck at the Denver Mint, and the D mint mark provides the first important clue for collectors who are identifying the coin. According to PCGS Coin Facts, the Denver Mint produced 276,829,530 Jefferson nickels dated 1963. A large mintage that tells us immediately that the date itself is not an ultra-low mintage rarity. However, this is where experienced collectors begin to think differently, because original mintage and surviving high-grade population are not the same thing. Millions of coins may have been produced, but only a much smaller number may survive today with exceptionally sharp strikes, attractive original surfaces, minimal marks, and clearly defined Monticello steps. That difference between total production and high-quality survival is one of the most important concepts in Jefferson nickel collecting, and it is exactly what makes the 1963 D worth examining carefully rather than dismissing it simply because the mintage was large. The current market for the 1963 D Jefferson nickel must therefore be separated into different categories. An ordinary circulated example generally does not belong in the same price discussion as a superb certified full steps example, and a possible variety should not be valued like a normal coin unless the variety has been properly identified and authenticated. Published auction records provide the best way to understand the upper end of the market, and PCGS records show that exceptional 1963 D examples have achieved prices far above the coin's 5-cent face value. The exact amount depends heavily on grade, full steps designation, eye appeal, certification, auction timing, and collector competition. This is why responsible collectors should avoid statements suggesting that every 1963 D is automatically worth thousands or millions instead. The market evidence shows that exceptional examples can become highly desirable, and that is already an exciting story. A coin with a face value of 5 cents can enter a completely different collector market when it survives at a remarkable grade with strong strike characteristics. And that is the detail that should make anyone who finds a 1963 D take a second look, not because every coin is a jackpot, but because the right coin can be significantly more desirable than an ordinary circulated example. The full steps designation is particularly important for anyone studying the 1963 D Jefferson nickel, because the steps beneath Monticello are part of the reverse design and can provide an important indication of strike quality and preservation. Jefferson nickels were not always struck with every step equally sharp, and contact with other coins or handling can also damage or interrupt those delicate details. This means that a coin can appear attractive from the obverse, but become much more interesting when you examine the reverse. Collectors often use magnification and strong lighting to inspect the steps, looking for complete separation and the characteristics required for a professional full steps designation. This is not something that should be guessed from a quick glance, because grading services use established standards. And a coin that looks sharp to the naked eye may not meet the technical requirements for the designation. Nevertheless, the reverse is absolutely worth examining, because a strong strike combined with excellent preservation can move a coin into a much more specialized collector category. And this is one of the most rewarding skills a Jefferson nickel collector can develop, learning to turn the coin over and immediately study Monticello rather than focusing only on the portrait and date. The phrase "old but very fine condition" can also be useful when describing a coin visually, but collectors should understand that market grading and visual descriptions are not the same thing. A coin that looks very fine to an owner may receive a different professional grade after detailed examination, and the difference between circulated and mint state is especially important. Mint state coins have not undergone ordinary circulation wear, while very fine coins clearly show circulation. And that distinction can have a major effect on the market. If you have a 1963D that is genuinely in very fine condition, the coin can still be attractive, historic, and collectible, but the extraordinary prices associated with the highest grade full steps examples should not automatically be applied to it. The best approach is to preserve the coin and determine its actual grade before making any valuation decision. This is also why cleaning should be avoided. A collector might see an old coin and think that removing discoloration will make it more valuable, but aggressive cleaning can damage the original surfaces and reduce desirability. Preserving the coin in its current state gives collectors and professional graders a much better opportunity to evaluate what is actually there. Now imagine that your 1963D is not simply a normal circulated nickel. Imagine that it has unusually sharp detail, strong original luster, minimal marks, and very clearly defined Monticello steps. This is where the investigation becomes much more exciting, because high-grade survivors are what specialists watch closely. PCGS auction records for the 1963D demonstrate that exceptional full steps examples have attracted substantial premiums. And the market history confirms that the difference between an ordinary coin and an elite certified example can be enormous. However, the important thing is not to chase a headline number without understanding the coin behind it. Auction results belong to individual pieces, and the value of another coin depends on its exact grade, designation, surface quality, certification, and market timing. This is why serious collectors compare their coins with several relevant auction records rather than relying on one isolated sale. If your 1963D is exceptionally sharp, the next step is careful examination, then comparison with professional references, and if the characteristics justify it, professional certification, because an independently established grade can help determine whether your coin belongs to the ordinary market or the premium collector market. One of the most exciting possibilities with any older Jefferson nickel is a recognized die variety. Collectors have spent decades studying tiny production differences created during the preparation and use of dies, and these varieties can sometimes become highly desirable. However, this is also an area where caution and knowledge are essential. A strange-looking mark does not automatically mean that a coin contains a valuable error, scratches, contact marks, corrosion, die wear, and lighting can all create misleading appearances. A genuine variety should have recognized diagnostics that distinguish it from ordinary damage, and collectors should compare suspected varieties with authoritative references before assigning a major value. This approach is especially important when creating YouTube content about rare coins because dramatic claims can spread quickly online, but accurate variety identification gives the story much greater credibility. If your 1963D appears unusual around the date, mint mark, lettering, or other design areas, document what you see, use magnification, compare the feature with established references, and seek professional attribution if necessary. The goal is not to force the coin into a rare category. The goal is to discover what the coin genuinely is. There is also a fascinating historical dimension to the 1963D Jefferson nickel. Because the early 1960s were an important period in American monetary history, the United States was experiencing major economic and social changes, coin production was expanding, and the Denver Mint was producing enormous quantities of circulating coinage. These coins became part of daily American life, moving through stores, banks, businesses, transportation systems, vending machines, and household coin jars. Decades later, collectors can hold one of those same pieces and examine it for signs of its production history. That connection between ordinary commerce and modern collecting is one reason Jefferson nickels remains so popular. The coin is small, inexpensive to manufacture, and made primarily for everyday use. Yet its historical journey can turn it into a fascinating collectible, and when a particular example survives in extraordinary condition, it becomes an even more interesting survivor from the era. When discussing market value today, we should focus on documented evidence rather than sensational speculation. A 5-cent coin cannot simply be called a $50 million coin because someone wants a dramatic headline, and there is no responsible basis for claiming that an ordinary 1963 D. Jefferson nickel is worth $50 million. The genuine excitement comes from the fact that exceptional certified examples can bring significant premiums. And documented auction results allow collectors to see what the market has actually paid. This is the difference between a coin collecting story that creates curiosity and one that creates misinformation. If a viewer finds a 1963 D in very fine condition, they should not assume it matches the value of a top-grade full-step specimen. Instead, they should determine the actual condition, inspect the reverse, investigate possible varieties, and compare the coin with sales of pieces that genuinely match its characteristics. This approach gives collectors a realistic pathway from discovery to valuation, and it also makes the rare discoveries much more exciting because the final value is supported by evidence rather than imagination. For anyone searching pocket change, old coin jars, inherited collections, or boxes of family coins, the 1963 D. Jefferson nickel is worth recognizing, not because every example is rare, but because it can be a useful gateway into understanding how coin value works. Start with the date and mint mark, then inspect the condition, then examine the reverse steps, then investigate possible varieties, and finally compare the coin with trusted auction records. This sequence prevents collectors from becoming distracted by dramatic claims and helps them focus on the characteristics that actually influence the market. If the coin is heavily circulated, preserve it and enjoy its historical value. If it appears unusually sharp, investigate further. If the steps look exceptional, compare them with professional examples. And if you believe you may have a recognized variety, seek authoritative confirmation before assuming a high value. This method is simple, practical, and powerful because it turns ordinary coin hunting into a structured investigation. The market for collectible Jefferson nickels demonstrates a basic principle that applies across numismatics: supply matters, condition matters, rarity matters, and collector demand matters. But these factors do not operate independently. A coin can have a large mintage and still become scarce in elite condition. A coin can be common in circulated grades, but much harder to locate with full steps. And a recognized variety can create a separate collector market altogether. This is why the 1963 D. Jefferson nickel deserves attention. Its original mintage does not tell the whole story. Its surviving population at different grades tells another story. And the competition for high-quality examples tells an even more interesting story. When collectors build specialized sets, they often want the best examples they can find. And when only a small number meet the desired standards, those coins can become highly sought after. The market, therefore, rewards precision, not exaggeration. And the more precisely a collector understands the coin, the better positioned that collector becomes to recognize a genuinely desirable example. If your 1963 D. Jefferson nickel is described as very fine, take a close look at the amount of wear and the remaining detail. On the obverse, inspect Jefferson's hair, cheek, jawline, and the surrounding lettering. On the reverse, examine Monticello and the steps beneath it. Then inspect the rim and surfaces for significant damage. Do not confuse dirt with rarity, and do not confuse discoloration with an error. Instead, document the coin exactly as it appears. Because preservation of the original condition is important, collectors generally prefer coins that have not been harshly altered, and a coin with original surfaces can be evaluated more accurately than one that has been polished, scraped, or chemically cleaned. If you believe the coin could be especially valuable, professional grading can provide an independent assessment, and that assessment can be compared with published auction records for the same date, mint mark, grade, and designation. The greatest excitement in coin collecting often comes from the moment when an ordinary object suddenly becomes meaningful. Perhaps you find the coin in an old drawer. Perhaps it comes from a family collection. Perhaps it has been sitting unnoticed among modern change. And perhaps you only discover its importance after learning what full steps means. That moment of discovery is what keeps collectors searching. And the 1963 Jefferson nickel provides an excellent example of why knowledge is more valuable than simply memorizing price lists. If you know what to look for, you can recognize strong strike quality, understand the difference between circulated and mint state condition, investigate varieties responsibly, and compare your findings with actual market evidence. Without that knowledge, even a genuinely interesting coin can be overlooked. And that is why every old nickel deserves at least a moment of attention before it is dismissed as ordinary. Now let us bring everything together. The 1963 Jefferson nickel was produced at the Denver Mint in a large quantity, 276,829,530 pieces, according to PCGS coin facts. So the date itself is not a traditional low mintage rarity, yet exceptional examples can become much more difficult to locate because of condition and strike quality. Particularly when collectors demand strong full steps characteristics. The coin's unique features include the Jefferson portrait, the 1963 date, the D mint mark, and the Monticello reverse. While the condition can range from heavily circulated examples to extremely high-grade certified specimens, collector demand becomes strongest when the coin combines desirable characteristics such as superior preservation, sharp strike quality, full steps, attractive surfaces, and recognized varieties, and the market reflects that difference. This is why a simple 5-cent denomination can become a serious collectible in the right circumstances. And this is also why your own 1963 D deserves a closer examination before you decide what it is worth. Step 4. Imagine finding a Jefferson nickel that looks poor, worn, dark, and forgotten. A tiny 5-cent coin that has probably passed through countless hands, stores, pockets, cash registers, and coin jars. And at first glance it appears to be nothing more than ordinary old pocket change. But then you notice the date, 1968. You turn the coin over and see the famous Monticello building, and then you notice the small D mint mark. Suddenly this little 5-cent piece becomes a fascinating piece of American history, and that is exactly what we are exploring today. The 1968 Jefferson nickel, a coin that was struck at the Denver Mint during an important period in American coinage. A coin produced in large numbers for everyday commerce, yet a coin that becomes much more interesting when collectors examine condition, strike quality, full steps, surface preservation, and possible varieties. Because in the world of rare coins, the most valuable discovery is not always the oldest coin, it is often the coin with the right combination of characteristics. And that is why you should never judge an old Jefferson nickel only by how poor or worn it looks. Today we are going deep into the history and background of the 1968 Jefferson nickel, its unique features, the importance of the D mint mark, the role of Monticello, the meaning of full steps, rarity, and collector demand. The current documented market, practical collector tips, and the reasons exceptional examples can command dramatically more than their 5-cent face value. So stay with me, because this ordinary-looking nickel has a story that reaches from the United States Mint all the way into the modern collector marketplace. The Jefferson nickel has been part of American coinage since 1938, when Thomas Jefferson replaced the earlier Buffalo nickel design and became the central figure on the nation's 5-cent piece. Felix Schlag created the famous design, placing Jefferson's portrait on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse, and the design quickly became one of the most recognizable coins in American commerce. By 1968, the Jefferson nickel had already been familiar to Americans for 3 decades, and millions of these coins were moving through everyday transactions. The 1968 D issue was produced at the Denver Mint, and PCGS records a mintage of 91,227,880 pieces, which means that the 1968 D is not a low mintage rarity simply because of its date and mint mark, however. This is where the story becomes much more interesting, because original mintage and present-day scarcity are not the same thing. Millions can be produced while far fewer survive in exceptional condition, and collectors often focus on the quality of surviving coins rather than simply counting the number originally struck. This is particularly important for Jefferson nickels because strike quality can vary, and the small steps beneath Monticello can become weak or incomplete, meaning that a coin that looks attractive overall may still fail to meet the standards collectors seek for full steps. This difference between an ordinary survivor and an exceptional survivor is what gives the 1968D its place in the Jefferson nickel collecting world. Now let us look at the unique features that identify the 1968D Jefferson nickel. On the obverse you will see Thomas Jefferson facing left, with Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1968 surrounding the design. On the reverse you will see Monticello, Jefferson's famous Virginia home, together with United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, 5 cents, and MONTICLLO. The small d mint mark identifies the Denver Mint, and the coin has the standard 5-cent specifications for the period, including a 5-gram weight, a diameter of approximately 22.20 millimeters, a plain edge, and a copper-nickel composition. These details provide the basic identification, but advanced collectors do not stop there. They immediately begin examining the strike and preservation, especially the reverse steps beneath Monticello. Because those tiny horizontal details can separate a regular example from a premium full steps example, this is one of the most important habits for Jefferson nickel collectors. After confirming the date and mint mark, turn the coin over and study Monticello. Use good lighting, examine the step separation, inspect the surrounding fields, and look closely at the overall strike, because a coin can look worn on one side and still contain an interesting diagnostic feature. While a coin that looks beautiful from a distance may not have the sharp reverse detail collectors want, the more carefully you examine the coin, the more information you can discover. Condition is especially important when dealing with a coin described as poor, because poor condition and high collector value usually belong to very different categories, unless an unusual variety or other special characteristic is involved. A heavily circulated coin can still be historically fascinating, but its market position is generally very different from a professionally certified mint state example. And this distinction becomes extremely important when discussing the 1968D. PCGS describes the regular 1968D as common in all grades, including gem mint state, but also notes that the issue becomes an extreme rarity when full steps are involved. That is the central collecting story. The ordinary coin can be readily available, while an exceptional strike with complete steps can be much harder to locate. Current PCGS population information lists the regular 1968D across many mint state grades, while the separate full steps category contains only a very small number of certified examples, showing just how dramatic the difference can be between an ordinary high-grade coin and one with the specific reverse characteristics collectors seek. This is why the word poor should not end the investigation. Instead, it should encourage you to inspect the coin for something unusual. A poor circulated example may not be the high-value coin represented by a top auction record, but it can still be worth identifying correctly, preserving, and comparing with known varieties before it is dismissed. Current market provides a clear example of why condition matters. PCGS lists an auction record of $12,140 for a regular strike 1968D Jefferson nickel-graded MS68, sold at Heritage Auctions on September 28, 2022. And that record is important because it shows that even a coin with a very large original mintage can move well above face value when it reaches an exceptional certified grade. However, that number should not be applied to an ordinary poor condition example. The auction record belongs to a specific MS68 coin with exceptional preservation, and the market value of another 1968D depends on its actual grade, surfaces, strike, designation, certification, and collector demand. This is why responsible coin collecting content should always connect a price to the exact coin that produced it. Rather than suggesting that every example carries the same value, the documented $12,140 result is exciting precisely because it demonstrates what can happen when an ordinary 5-cent coin survives in extraordinary condition. And the full steps population makes the story even more interesting because the strongest reverse strikes can be far more difficult to locate. So if you have a poor condition 1968D, The right approach is to identify it, preserve it, and investigate it rather than automatically assigning the value of an elite certified specimen. Another fascinating aspect of the 1968D is the possibility of special die characteristics and varieties. Collectors study mint marks, doubled features, repunched details, die states, and other production characteristics across Jefferson nickel issues, but an unusual appearance should never automatically be called an error. A genuine mint error or recognized variety requires evidence that the feature was created during the minting process, rather than through circulation damage, corrosion, cleaning, or later alteration. This is why magnification and comparison are so important. If you see something unusual around the date, mint mark, lettering, or design, document exactly what you see and compare it with recognized examples. A coin that appears strange can be interesting even when it is not a major error, because studying the feature can teach you about how coins were manufactured, and occasionally a genuine recognized variety can create additional collector demand. The 1968D therefore offers multiple paths of investigation. You can study its history, condition, strike, full steps, surfaces, and possible varieties, and each path can reveal another layer of the story. For someone discovering a 1968D in pocket change, the first thing to do is confirm the basic identity. Look for the 1968 date on the obverse, locate the D mint mark, and make sure the design matches a standard Jefferson nickel. Then turn the coin over and inspect Monticello. The steps beneath the building should receive special attention, especially if the coin looks unusually sharp. After that, examine the surfaces under good light. Look for circulation wear, contact marks, scratches, discoloration, and evidence of cleaning, and then determine whether the coin appears circulated or potentially mint state. Remember that a poor condition coin should not be compared directly with a top certified example, but an unusual feature may justify additional research. If the coin looks exceptionally sharp despite its age, professional grading can provide a more reliable assessment. And if you suspect a variety, professional attribution can help determine whether the feature is genuine. Most importantly, do not clean the coin in an attempt to reveal hidden value, because preserving original surfaces is generally much safer for collector appeal. The market value of the 1968D Jefferson nickel is therefore best understood as a range of collecting possibilities rather than one dramatic number. An ordinary circulated example can remain close to its face value, while a better preserved example can have a premium. An exceptional mint state coin can reach a much higher level, and a truly remarkable example with rare strike characteristics can become far more desirable to specialists. PCGS's documented $12,140 MS68 auction record demonstrates that the upper end of the regular strike market can reach four figures, while the tiny full steps population demonstrates why exceptional examples can attract specialist attention. But there is no responsible basis for saying that an ordinary poor condition 1968D is automatically worth 7,000s or 40 millions. The real story is more compelling. A common-looking 5-cent coin can become valuable when it possesses the exact qualities that collectors have difficulty finding. And those qualities are what you should search for when examining your own coin. This distinction keeps the video exciting while also giving viewers information they can actually use when they find a 1968D in their own collections. The idea of pocket change treasure is powerful because it reminds us that valuable collecting opportunities can begin with ordinary objects. But the real treasure is knowledge. Once you understand the difference between circulated and mint state condition, once you know why Monticello's steps matter, once you understand how a mint mark identifies the production facility, and once you learn to separate genuine mint varieties from post-mint damage, every old Jefferson nickel becomes more interesting. The 1968D is particularly useful as a teaching coin because its large mintage makes the lesson clear. The date is common, yet the finest survivors can be difficult to locate. This teaches collectors that rarity is not always about how many coins were made. Sometimes it is about how few coins survived in the exact condition and strike quality that specialists want. And that is why a coin that looks poor may still deserve examination. Even when the individual example is not a high-value specimen, it can help you learn what separates ordinary coins from premium collectibles. There is also a fascinating historical story behind the year 1968. The United States was going through major changes. The country was producing large quantities of circulating coinage, and the Denver Mint was an important part of the national minting system. Every 1968 Jefferson nickel was created as money for ordinary American life, not as a rare collectible, and that makes the survival of exceptional examples even more interesting. These coins were never supposed to be museum pieces. They were meant to circulate, be spent, exchanged, and handled, yet some survived with extraordinary preservation. Decades later, collectors can examine those survivors and compare them with coins that spent years in circulation. The difference between those two groups is what creates much of the modern collector market, and the 1968 D is a perfect example of how an everyday object can become historically meaningful through survival. When discussing a market value of $7,000s or $40 million, accuracy is essential. The 1968 D does have a documented four-figure auction result, but the evidence does not support describing a normal poor condition example as a $7,000s to $40 million coin. The strongest verified figure from the regular strike issue is the $12,140 MS-68 auction record, recorded by PCGS. And that is already remarkable when compared with the 5-cent face value. The important thing is that the price belongs to an exceptional certified coin, not to every 1968 D, and the full steps category is even more specialized because only a tiny number are currently represented in the PCGS population data. This gives you a powerful and honest YouTube storyline. Your old poor condition coin may not match the record holder, but it could still be worth investigating for unusual characteristics. And if you ever discover an exceptionally preserved example, you now know exactly why it deserves a much closer look. Imagine now that someone discovers a 1968 D in an old collection and notices that the coin has unusually strong details. The portrait remains sharp, the fields appear clean, the lettering is crisp, and the Monticello steps look remarkably complete. That is the moment when the investigation becomes exciting, because the coin has moved beyond a simple date and mint mark identification and into the world of condition and strike analysis. The collector can compare the coin with certified examples, study the grading standards, examine the population reports, and determine whether professional certification is appropriate. This process is far more valuable than simply searching for a giant price number, because it teaches you how the market actually works. And if the coin eventually receives a high grade, the result can be connected directly to documented auction evidence. The journey from pocket change to certified collectible is what makes coin collecting so fascinating, and the 1968 D provides a perfect example of how that journey can begin with a coin that looked completely ordinary. The documented $12,140 MS-68 auction record proves that the denomination itself does not prevent a coin from reaching a significant premium, while the tiny full steps population demonstrates how difficult exceptional strike quality can be for this issue. Now we have reached the conclusion of our 1968 D. Jefferson nickel investigation. This coin was created as ordinary American money, but decades later, it can become a fascinating collectible depending on how it survived. Its 91,327,880 mintage means the date and mint mark are not enough by themselves to make it a rare coin. But exceptional condition, and especially full steps, can create a completely different level of collector interest. Professional records show that a certified MS-68 example reached $12,140 at auction, and current population data shows that full steps examples are exceptionally scarce, so the real treasure is not simply the old 5-cent denomination. It is the possibility of discovering an individual coin with characteristics that other collectors are actively searching for, and that is why every old Jefferson nickel deserves a closer look before it is spent or discarded. Knowledge turns ordinary pocket change into an opportunity to learn American history, minting, grading, and the collector market. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into the 1968 D. Jefferson nickel. If you enjoyed this rare coin story, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with another coin collector. And now I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever found a 1968 D. Jefferson nickel? Did yours look poor and heavily circulated? Or did you discover one with unusually sharp details and strong Monticello steps? Tell us what you found, because your coin could become the starting point for another fascinating investigation. Keep checking those old coins, keep learning the details, keep your discoveries preserved, and remember, sometimes the most interesting part of a coin is the tiny feature that almost everyone else overlooked. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next rare coin story.